Ladies and gentlemen, the Paroxysm Podcast, as we're now known, we got a very special guest today. It's just me, James Southard here, sitting there, getting ready to talk to one of my favorite guys in the wrestling business. One of my favorite guys to be around. He's taught me a lot. I've learned a lot from him, watching a lot of his tapes and stuff. We had him on back in April, May, something like that, before the big Texoma Pro show, so we got to talk about that. Got a couple more stories I'm going to ask him about. But let's go ahead and bring him on. He's my favorite cigar-smoking, cowboy hat-wearing, Native American, Puerto Rican from Vineland, New Jersey. He is the Arab legend, Al Farat. How's it going, Al?
Hey, man. Wow, what an introduction. Well, I can assure you, my dear friend, that the pleasure is all yours.
Oh, man, it's been a long time since we had you on. We had you on back in, what was it, April, May, sometime before the Texoma show. Man, that was kind of a fun show. We ended up working everybody with that.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. Of course, I always have fun doing these podcasts. You know, it kind of gives the wrestling fans kind of a glimpse into the world of professional wrestling, you know, behind the scenes and up close and personal, I guess, to our personal lives. So I really appreciate it. And I got to tell you, for a young guy, you're pretty old school. You said you've been watching my tapes. Nobody watches tapes anymore.
Oh, yeah, man. I say it's been a minute. I haven't seen you since, it was Dallas was last show you worked with the IWR, and then you guys worked Weatherford. Of course, now I'm out, so. But that Texoma show, that was a lot of fun, man. We ended up working each other pretty good with that Farat costume.
Well, you know, I actually had an individual that was working security at the show we did last night in Weatherford, Oklahoma, and coincidentally, he brought up that particular night. He said, "You know, I saw you when you wrestled against the Barbarian at the Texoma show, and there was." And I guess he was trying to get me to remember him. And he said, "You know, I was there, and remember there was that guy that dressed up as you for the come dressed as your favorite character." And I said, "Yeah, I remember that, but kind of what a coincidence that you would call today, the very next day after we had this conversation."
Yeah, it's funny. I'm trying to think of who that could be, because as far as I know, I was the only one there. But that was a lot of fun, man. The best part was we kind of kept each other in the dark on that. I sent you just bits and pieces as it was coming along, but had the big reveal at the show. Had a lot of fun getting to talk with you again, and the Barbarian, who's a great guy. I can't speak highly enough of him. Who's now taking bookings through a friend of mine, Dylan Hines, Bobby Fulton's son, the Good Doctor. I'll put him over.
Is that right?
I think so.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Well, you know, me and Barbarian. We go way back, you know. Of course, I wrestled him a long time ago in Puerto Rico for Carlos Colon's company, and he was the Barbarian back then, actually, but he was called Tonga the Barbarian, and he and I then again reconnected for the old FCW, Florida Championship Wrestling, when Harry Venice had it, and Vicious Vinny was the booker at the time, and coincidentally, we did a tour together. I think it was like 4 shows in one weekend or something, and it just so happens that he was my roommate for that tour. And when we went back a few months later, he asked to room with me again, and we got really, really close. We rode some airboat rides together in the swamps of the Everglades there in Florida, and we have some very, very funny stories about that trip. But what a nice guy.
Oh, yeah, he was very professional. Said we ended up kind of working him, too. He didn't know anything about it until we came out and did that, but even talking to him in the back, he was super nice guy. You know, he's intimidating as hell still to this day. He's one of those guys you wouldn't want to run into in a dark alley, but really great guy. And you guys had a hell of a match there at Texoma, and from what I heard, there might be some stuff going on again a little later in the year. Not sure if we're allowed to comment on that, but that was a really good match. But man, what else you been up to? You know, you've been doing a lot of stuff with Otter Trail, of course, your band, your music group, and now you're getting back with the IWR with a good friend of mine. I helped get in at IWR, Prince Mahali.
Well, you know, It wasn't that I took a break or anything. It's just that, like you mentioned, I have a Grammy Award nominated group, Otter Trail. I do music professionally, and I've got 11 recordings out on the market right now, and we're doing pretty good with that. And I tend not to intertwine or mix both of those worlds, my music world, my personal music world, and my wrestling world. But a lot of fans, they're what you call smart marks, and they know a lot about my personal life because it's pretty much on social media. But I'm a pretty public figure in both the music and the wrestling. But I'm doing a lot with that. And of course, I've traveled to, I think I've been to about 15 states in the last just 2 months alone traveling with the music. But of course, wrestling never takes a back seat. It's just that sometimes I'm busier doing music over wrestling, and then sometimes, the other way around. So right now, IWR's got some big plans, and we've got some TV deals that we're working on, and we had 2 big shows back to back. We did, of course, Ardmore, the big show, Oaklamania, and then this weekend we had, I forget the name of the show, Sold Out, I think it was, in Weatherford, Oklahoma, where I went face-to-face with the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, and got put in the $1 Million Dream. Of course, he cheated, as always, because, I'm a technical wrestler. I'm all high-flying, high spots. I don't do any cheating whatsoever.
I heard somebody refer to the Arab legend as a spot monkey. I don't know.
Well, I told him, I said, I was gonna one of the moves I called, one of the spots, I said I wanted to do a corkscrew plancha, but he wouldn't take it. So, oh well.
You'll get out there with like Fuego or Chandler or some of the younger high flyers, and maybe they'll take the plancha.
Well, speaking of Fuego, a lot of people don't know this. It's of course it's common knowledge, but a lot of guys don't know this. But he's my nephew. And I have a lot of relatives in the business now. I'm kind of in a weird spot because, I'm a third generation in the business, but not really a third generation wrestler. I'm sorry, second generation. I take that back. Second generation, because my dad wasn't really a professional wrestler, but he was a promoter. He promoted shows in Puerto Rico in the 80s and 90s, and a lot of people don't know that. So he was in the business, but I'm not really considered a second generation because he wasn't a wrestler. But now, of course, I have my son who's a referee. He's been a referee for years, so he would, I guess, be considered second generation talent. And then, of course, my nephew AJ Akbar Farat, my oldest sister's son, and then, of course, my nephew Fuego. And I have another nephew, my youngest. Not my youngest sister, but next to my youngest. She has a son who now wants to kind of get into professional wrestling. And my son, Dre, who's 16, has been expressing an interest to get into the business. So we're very blessed. My sister, my late sister, rest in peace, Lisa, she wrestled like 2 or 3 matches in the very beginning when we first started, but didn't really like it very much. She just kind of did it for my dad and me, kind of one of those deals. But we've always been involved in the business, from a very, very, very early age. And now to see my family, of course, my other nephew, DK Santos, he goes by Babyface Diamante, my manager. He's, again, my legitimate nephew. And so a lot of them are in the business, and I'm pretty proud of that.
Yeah, it's the unknown dynasty. People talk about the Hart dynasty, and then there's the Santos dynasty that nobody really knows about. But hey, there's a lot of them out there, and a lot of great talent out there too. I've been watching some Akbar stuff from, I think he's in Florida now. Yeah. He goes back and forth from San Antonio to Florida, and he's kind of taken somewhat of a break from the business. He's got a lot of projects that he's working on in the music industry. He's a musician. He does reggaeton music, kind of like what Daddy Yankee does. Well, it's actually not kind of. It's exactly what Daddy Yankee does, and Don Omar and all these guys. So
he's got his hands in a lot of different cookie jars, if you know what I mean, and he's doing pretty good for himself. Sometimes he gets inspired and gets back in, and other times he doesn't. I feel that he should, in reality, should have already been a lot further along. But politics and different things that have come up. He's just kind of taken a break from the business. But hopefully he'll be back, and who knows, maybe better than ever.
Oh yeah, man. That's the business. It comes with politics and all that goes with it. You get guys that should be way up at the top that just can't break through, and vice versa. But it's a wonderful business to be around. And I realized after we let you go last time, there were quite a few of the famous Farat stories I've heard that we didn't get to talk about. I mean, and we could probably give you your own podcast and go for 20 years and not hear all the stories. But this is one of the ones that interests me. Kind of hate to. It's a rough transition here, but you got a story involving Gentleman Chris Adams, a personal favorite of mine, when he worked in World Class and all that. So you got an interesting connection to him.
Well, I'll tell you, I've often been asked to write a book. I've really thought about it because I have so many interesting stories to share, not only within the professional wrestling business, but also in my musical life and in my personal life. Stories that, in reality, most people would hear them, or some people would hear them and find them a little bit dubious or doubtful. But the reality is, there were a lot of things in my personal life that really happened to me that is really amazing. When I tell people that I was stranded in a small rickety boat with my mom and my former father-in-law and my ex-wife. She was my wife then, but we were stuck at sea for hours and hours in a big hurricane, and water was coming to the boat, and we almost died that night. We got stranded on a little bitty island. I had to swim across from one island to another. They were like keys, and when we swam from one island to the other, because the boat got capsized on the other side, we were swimming, and I looked down because we had no snorkel or anything, and I remember my wife was in front of me and I was behind her. I looked down, and there I see a little gathering of sharks, and I kid you not, 20 feet below me, and they were just there on the bottom of ocean floor. And little stories like that, and another story about how I got picked up at one time. I got a call, and it was almost midnight, and I thought it was a prank call. Someone called me and said that they needed me to do the voiceover or add some vocal sound effects to a song that was going to be part of a major motion picture. And of course, me not believing it, I kind of called the bluff, and they said, no, it's a true story. And they came and they sent a limousine for me, and on 12:15, this is past midnight now, in New York City. My brother Chico was with me, Steven Perez out of New York, and he went with me. I went into the limousine, and they drove me into Manhattan, into this building, and we go upstairs. And when I go into the studio to record this little bit, I was recommended by another lady who was part of a very popular trio of musicians, Pure Fay. Her name was Sonny Moreno. She recommended me for it. He's, saying that, this guy's got a good voice. He can do this. He makes all kind of imitations with his voice and characters and accents. And when I get to the studio, there was Tom Cruise, the actual actor Tom Cruise. And it turns out I did a sound bit, little vocable for the major motion picture movie, Mission Impossible, the first one. And I was on a theme, the theme song. So yeah. I've got tons of story like that. I one time at a wrestling show, there was they're pretty popular now. They're called food trucks, Well, there was a food truck serving food, and I went up there, and there was a wrestler called Tamba. He did like an African gimmick, and I remember I went up there after the show, and I was all sweaty, and it was raining that day. And after the match, I ordered something from this food truck, and with my hand I grabbed the when they lift the window, they lift it and it turns kind of like into a little cover, and then they have these two bars holding it up. Well, I held on to one of those bars, and it got electrocuted, got stuck to it. And Tamba had to tackle me and save my life. Stories like that one. Well, in the wrestling business, I've got tons of stories like that too. For example, the story of course, I was there we'll talk about this maybe in a future podcast. I was there when, for example, Bruiser Brody was killed. A lot of people don't know that. But this particular story that you're referring to is I had the opportunity to work Gentleman Chris Adams, not very many times, 2 to 3 times maybe. But, this was at a time where I really didn't know him very well. I was still relatively new. I had been in the business several years, but nothing like, I didn't have the contacts I have now. And anyway, so one time, of course, this was after after he had passed away, I did a show for a promoter named Tom Vance, and it might be Tom Lance. I don't remember his name, but anyway, he used to run a Superstars of Wrestling, SOW, I think it was called, in around the Dallas area. He ran in East Texas, and anyway, we did a show in Kilgore, Texas, and I remember that at that time, it was still kind of, they didn't call them independents. They called them, underground shows or outlaw promoters. So we did a show, and the promoter, the guy that got me on, was General Skandar Akbar, rest in peace, one of my favorite people in the world. And I remember saying not having a whole lot of money and not having enough, to get back home on. And, of course, I got paid that night, and they said, well, we can't provide you a room, but if you want to stay with this guy, you can. And, of course, that time, this older gentleman was helping the promoter run the shows. And he introduced himself just by his nickname, and that's everybody knew him as Boo Ray. That was his nickname, Boo Ray, So that night, I stayed with him, and he allowed me to stay in his place, and I slept on the couch, and come to find out, I think I don't remember if it was the next day or maybe 2-3 days later, I was talking to Akbar, and he told me that that was the gentleman who had, in self-defense, had murdered or killed Chris Adams. And to know that I was there, where it happened, within feet of, where it happened, it was really a scary thing. But that's kind of my Chris Adams story. I've got so many of them, man. I've got Tony Atlas stories. I've got, you name it, I've got them.
Yeah, man, and that's what I said. I mean, we could do 20 years of podcasts every week. We could do like Cornette or any of the other guys that do podcasts, and we probably wouldn't even scratch the surface of wrestling stories, personal stories, because you've got so much stuff that people would say is unbelievable. But more than anything, it's kind of cool. I said when I was working with the IWR, I always said that one of the best parts of my job was getting to talk to guys. Of course, they bring in the big talent, and it's always nice to talk to guys like them. Like, was it Sold Out last night? They brought in Kevin Nash, guys like that. But to have somebody like you that, came into a locker room who, shakes everybody's hand. At the time, I was just a little security guy. Nobody, don't pay much attention to me. I'm just doing my job. And, you'd sit down and have a conversation with me. And it's the things like that. Having an access to as much knowledge and as much stories as you have, it's, if I could recommend anything to anybody in the indie circuit, if they're listening, talk to a guy like Al, or find Al. He ain't that hard to find, but you'll get a wealth of knowledge from a guy like Al, and stories that you wouldn't be able to believe, but they're too good to be true.
Yeah, and I'm just fortunate that a lot of the times, a lot of these stories took place. There were individuals there that could confirm these stories, and of course there were times where there weren't individuals there, and it's just something that so unbelievable that sometimes I don't. I say to myself, "Wow, I can't believe that. I can't believe that happened to me." But it's made me who I am today. I've had a lot of bad experiences, good experiences, but good or bad, it's what's brought me to where I am today. So I don't regret any of it. Like how I lost my hearing in my left ear. I've got an 80% hearing loss in my left ear because, again, a story about what happened to me during a wrestling match and things of that nature. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that I think I'll eventually write a book. I'm relatively really nobody. I've always maintained, I've tried to maintain anyway, a semblance of humbleness because I don't want to come off as someone who thinks he's bigger than what he really is. But there are guys like myself and Dusty Wolf, that maybe we might not have made it, as big as we wanted to or should have or whatever, but we still have stories to tell. Like Dusty, for example. Dusty Wolf has a great, great book. I think it's called Journal of a Journeyman or something like that. And they're good books, and I think he actually is the one that he's my inspiration to want to write a book, because I think if someone picks it up, whether they're a wrestling fan or not, they're going to read it and be intrigued by my life story. And who knows, at the very least, it'll be something that future generations and within my family alone could read and cherish.
Yeah, and that's the thing with books, and I think it's, we've discussed this in the past. It shows that the knowledge and the stories and the experiences that you've gained in your personal life, in music, in wrestling, that they all need to be passed down and given to the future generations so they can see, hey, this is what we did, this is how we did it, and you get this treasure trove of knowledge. And with a book, it's probably going to be there for at least hundreds of years, if not thousands, in a format that anybody could just pick up and read. You might get, sure, it might be a family heirloom, like you mentioned, or, you might get some kid thousands of miles away reading this going, wow, I've never heard of this guy, I don't know why I haven't heard of this guy. He you wrestle guys like Ric Flair and just tons of huge names, and somebody can read that book and go, wow, this is a first-hand account from a guy who got to do all these things, but was still willing to share the knowledge with the generations on down the line.
Well, it's one of the things I try to talk to a lot of my students about. And one of my students is none other than the owner of the IWR, Jerry Bostic. And I was just talking to him, as a matter of fact, last night during the show. I told him that I really want to tell my story. I still can go. I don't want to just be subjected to just being somebody that works in the back or just does, menial jobs or does jobs in the ring for people. I have a story to tell, and I think that what happens is a lot of these promoters, and I'm not saying this is the case with Jerry, but a lot of these promoters, they focus too much on bringing in a lot of this big talent and providing sustenance for this big talent, and providing them paychecks and stuff. And then the guys, homegrown guys, they're left struggling, trying to, be loyal to the company and trying to, make the company grow. And I think IWR is almost at a point where we can really run shows and rely on just a homegrown talent and still bring in people, particularly in Oklahoma. Because the reality is the business has changed. There's a lot of people that want to see your Kevin Nashes, and they want to see Sting, and they want to see Jim Cornette. They want to see these older guys. Absolutely. There's no denying that. But at the same time, there seems to be a movement, or there has been a movement now for several years, where it seems like what the wrestling fan wants nowadays more than ever, and I'm talking about the modern wrestling fan, they want to see indie talent, especially hot indie talent, so I really believe that IWR is in a position right now to where all the guys that we have that are homegrown guys have been built up so well that that they should be showcased more. They should be making a little more money, and I think we're almost at that point where we can start getting there, because Jerry's got a good mind he's got a good head on his shoulders. He's got a good mind for the business, and he's very approachable, and he's learned very well. But at the same time, going back to what you were saying about my character and my personal life, sometimes I sit back and it amazes even myself. I amaze myself. I'm like, wow, man, to think that I've been in the ring with Tommy Dreamer, Taz, the Great Muta, Dick Murdoch, Terry Funk, Stan Hansen, Bruiser Brody, Abdullah the Butcher, the Iron Sheik, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash. I've been in the ring with so many gargantuan names, but yet I never really, really made it to a point where I was a household name. And a lot of that, I think, is self-inflicted, because admittedly, I really wanted to pursue my music career, and in the Native American world, in the Native American music world, I've managed to do that. Now, I'm starting to realize now that a lot of years have kind of passed me by, and I didn't really take full advantage of what I could have been in the professional wrestling business. And it's why I had that conversation with Jerry. I think that before my time is up, I'd like to do some very, very big things. If for the very least, if for nothing else, just to kind of leave a lasting mark in the business, before I retire or whatever. I'm not close to retiring yet, but you know what I mean.
Man, and we discussed it last time. You already kind of have left your mark because you were the big part of the big two trainers here in Oklahoma. Back in pretty much since the late '90s on. Really, the most guys, I'd say 75-80% in the Oklahoma indie scene have been trained by either Tom Jones or yourself. When you started up with training with the the Prince Al Farat School of Slams. Down in Ardmore, so you guys have put out so many great talent. Guys like you mentioned Jerry, you mentioned there's other guys, Dane Griffin, Coyote, who's getting ready to have his Ring of Honor tryout in November, and things like that. You were responsible for producing a lot of great talent already, but and as you said, you're a long way from retiring. You're arguably in the best shape of your life right now. Getting back, you're aiming for 215?
Well, I started out at 303 pounds, 303, and I wasn't getting around very well. I just didn't feel good. I sluggish, and there's nothing wrong with me. I don't have diabetes. I don't have anything, but I went to the doctor and routine checkup for my license, and he diagnosed me with glaucoma. And of course, a lot of people have glaucoma, but it scared me, and he said it was due to high blood pressure, and it wasn't high blood pressure that was uncontrollable. It was just, something that I needed to just stay on. So I decided to get into shape. And of course, I had some personal issues in my life as well, but I decided to get into shape, and I'm down right now. I'm down to 256. I want to try to get down to about 220. I think that would be a healthy size for me, and I'm trying to kind of change up my character a little bit and kind of go with the times, I guess. But there's so many guys that I started training guys in New York City, and I trained or helped at that time. I helped train guys like the Headhunters, for example. They were really big in Japan and Mexico. They were in ECW for a while. They were in 1992 SummerSlam. And I trained some other guys down in Louisiana, 4 or 5 guys, and Brian Hart and some other ones. And, I remember when the Luke Hawks, for example, he runs Wildcat Wrestling in Louisiana. I remember when he first came into the business, he wanted to get trained. He came to my living room. I was living with one of my students at the time. I was going through my divorce. I remember him coming in and wanting to be trained, and we showed him stuff right there in the living room floor, and of course he went on to get trained elsewhere and became one, a hell of a dang worker. And I managed to, like, wherever I lived, because I lived in a lot of different states, because I really, really traveled a lot, trying to wrestle in different territories, even though the territories really didn't exist at that time. I kind of came in at the tail end of all that, but then I moved to Dallas, Texas, and started helping Skandar Akbar train guys up there in his gym in Dallas. But the main trainer was another buddy of mine, Slam Shady, Anthony Coletti. But I'd go in there and help out, and then when I moved to Oklahoma, I started working for a company called Underground Wrestling. I don't really remember the name of the company, but it was run by a guy named Sean Summers, and they wanted me to. Then the company went out of business, and then another company started up called AACW, All American Championship Wrestling, and that was run by Tommy Demos, Stepstool Tommy D, is I think what they call him, and there were some other guys involved in it. But anyway, they had a wrestling school, and I started training the guys, and I had an assistant, Kareem Sadat, Travis. He kind of helped me out, and we had a good little crew of students there. My wife at the time was training, just a bunch of different guys. Well, one of the trainees that came in, and he would travel from Ardmore all the way to Oklahoma City, was Jerry Bostic, and his sidekick, his childhood friend, Derek Prentice, or D-Money. Well, then I had a falling out with the company, and started training these guys wherever I could train them. I would go to Mid-South and train them there. I would go to this other young lady. Her name was Venom. She was a worker. She had a little 12 by 12 ring in her backyard. I would train them there, wherever I could. And then one day, Jerry Bostic came up to me and said, "I'd like to start my own company and run a mega show." And sure enough, he ran at the time, we've had very many of them since then, but at the time it was the biggest star-studded independent wrestling show ever in the history of Oklahoma, and that's arguably a fact. That's at the time we had NWA champion Jeff Jarrett, we had Lex Luger, just a bunch of people, and right there at the Hardy Murphy Coliseum, and that's kind of started everything, and it created some heat with my former employees. They weren't really my employees, but the company that I had worked for, but that's water under the bridge now. But then when we did that show, we ran it under the UWF banner. For some reason, he wanted to use UWF. And I want to say he got Bill Watts' blessing, because I kind of remember something along those lines. But anyway, so after our first show, we decided that we were going to buy our own ring, because we had rented the ring at that time. So we bought a ring and rented a building. I moved from the Lawton area to Ardmore, and we opened up a school. And at first it was called Prince Alpharat's Slam U, but we received a cease and desist letter from the person who actually had that name, and so we had to change it to just Prince Alpharat School of Wrestling. And well, out of that school, we had Jerry Bostic, we had D-Money, we had Dane Griffin, Montego Sika, we had Coyote, we had Ray the Bay, we had Inzane the Dog, we had Chris Cambridge. Man, the list goes on and on. We had so many guys that we trained at the time, and Les Main, and his current, his wife at the time, I forget her name, but she was being trained. My wife then was still helping train the girls. We were Hobby Hernandez, and I'm sure I'm missing some names, but there were a lot of them.
Yeah, it was a huge.
And we started running shows. Of course, we started monthly, and then we went bi-weekly, and we did pretty good. We had a good little setup, and anyway, so here we are years later, and we've now become this pretty big company. We've done pretty good. We're not quite where we need to be, but I feel like, and I know it's probably a cliche, you hear it all the time from different promoters, but I really believe that we're onto something pretty big, and hopefully everlasting. But you know how this business is. One day you're in business, the next day you're not. But I think if we play our cards right and we got the right people in the right places, I think we could really make a good go of this.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I left the IWR back in June, but I still, to this day, and I'll stand by this, that I think the IWR has a unique style, because they bring in all sorts of styles. You get the guys who do the high-flying lucha stuff. You get the guys who do the old school, traditional classic-based wrestling. You get a little bit of everything. And I think when you get that much, as you said, homegrown talent, because when we were in McAllister, which was my last show, we probably drew 250 people. It was a good, to be in a relatively small town like that with just homegrown talent, to draw 250 people nowadays, back in the day, if you drew 250, you'd be out of business next week. But, in the current state of wrestling in Oklahoma, to draw 250 people in a small town to a show with homegrown talent, that's good. And they've proven that they could draw elsewhere. They've gone to Texas and drawn. They're going to Kansas in next month for a TV taping. So they're on the verge of getting TV. That's, they're having a pay-per-view, their first pay-per-view with GFW next week. Even though I'm not there, I will still champion for the IWR and tell them, and it's a great company that has a lot of potential for sure.
Well, you hit on something very key, and when we run these big shows, for example, Weatherford, I'll be honest with you, I don't know the numbers we did, honestly. Some say 400, some say 600. I really don't know. We had a good crowd, but of course, it was a gargantuan building. I mean, for an independent anyway. And we had an okay crowd, but the reality is, take the shows in Texas, for example. We drew in the hundreds, but we didn't break the 1,000. We didn't break. I think our biggest show, as far as numbers, was the first. I forget the name of it, but when we first made our first kind of comeback as IWR, our first show as IWR, major show at the Hardy Murphy, we had legitimately over 2,000 people, and then of course in Fire Lake we always draw very good, not as much as we want to, but certainly 1,500 or whatever it is, but the thing that you mentioned that I try to emphasize is that I remember a lot of we did shows, for example, in Ardmore. We would run a show at the I forget if it's called the HVF or something like that in Ardmore, building that seats probably 300-400 people, and we packed it with just homegrown talent. I mean, it happens. We did another show in I can't remember the name of it, but Healdton.
Healdton, yeah. The Armory.
Yeah, Healdton. The Armory, same way. Homegrown talent. And that place was packed.
Yeah, Fire Marshal shut us down. We were pulling out seats for more people. I think Fire Marshal shut us down at like 350, 400. We packed that place.
And to me, if we're drawing 300 or 400 like in Healdton and when we did that HVF, HVF, if we're drawing that many people, and then we're going to Weatherford with a packed card, and we're drawing 400 or 500, which isn't very many more than what we had in those two shows, then it tells you something, that the wrestling fans recognize our talent. Social media is such a powerful tool. So I think we're just about at the cusp of something where getting to the point where we're going to start to cut back on bringing in the major talent, only because it costs so freaking much to bring them in. Now, they serve their purpose, and I recognize that. But the reality is, how many times we've done shows, and I'll go into the arena. Well, take this past week, for example, Saturday, yesterday, when I pulled into the arena and I got my suitcase and started walking, and I passed this long line of fans. I kid you not, 90% of them, Farat, Farat. I'm like, it's a humbling experience, because that they know who you are, and we're just, again, home. I mean, yeah, I've been around, but I'm not anybody that was on WWE television, and for them to recognize that, it just goes to show you how powerful of a tool social media is. So what I'm trying to say is, I really believe that if we would have had that show in Weatherford with, instead of having, I don't know how many big names we had, but let's just say we had 10. If we would have had 2, maybe 3, and then nothing but homegrown, I think we would have still been able to draw that amount of people. I really do.
Oh, yeah, for sure, because the big talent is good when you're starting off. It brings eyes. People go, oh, wow, he's going to be here for this company. That introduces him to that company. You draw him to those shows. You can introduce him to the homegrown talent. And then from there, you can, slowly cut back. And then if you put your homegrown talent over on these big stars, you build them up. Hey, remember that time, say, for example, Coyote beat Chavo Guerrero? When you get to put them over like that, with names like that, people remember them and go, wow, he must be really good if he could beat Chavo. And then you build up the homegrown talent, and you can eventually just cut out the major names from your shows, and then bring them in occasionally throughout the year as kind of supplemental, but you could still have a lot of powerful names. You just have to build them up properly.
Well, I think that there's a formula, and I really believe in my heart of hearts, I believe that Jerry has discovered the formula somehow to be able to bring in all these people and not be completely bankrupt. Because I'm not saying we're doing well, But the fact that we're still running tells me that he has discovered a formula, and he's got a lot of good people around him that are teaching him a lot of good things, like Justin Roberts and Jim Ross, a lot of different people that are really teaching him well. So I think that a lot of people tend to think that we're bringing in all this talent and it's all out of pocket. No, a lot of this talent's wanting to come on their own dime because there's some type of formula that's happening. It's what's keeping us in business, because if it was all out of pocket, believe me, we'd be out of business. We would have went out of business on the first show. Because in order to sustain all this talent, you have to have 2,000 people. You have to have 2,500, people at these shows, and we're not getting that. We're getting close, but so he's doing a real good job. And if anything, it's giving him quite a reputation as being a straight up honest promoter, and a lot of big names want to work with him. And he's developed such good friendships with people like Sting. I'm talking about mega superstars, And when I talk to these stars, incredibly they treat me almost with reverence, and it's so humbling. I can't even believe it, because oh yeah, Jerry's told me about you, or Coyote's told me about you. You're the guy that trained them, and it makes me feel like the resident guru, it's a good feeling, because it makes me feel like all these, of course, they're like all my kids anyway, and they treat me that way, like a father figure. But it still to this day brings a tear to my eye when I see that these guys my boys are getting put over, and they're doing what they love, and they're making a name out of themselves. And Jerry's onto something really good. We're just real close, and when we get to where we need to get, I think it's going to be good for all the homegrown talent.
Oh yeah, for sure. And if I can say anything about Jerry, it's if he doesn't know something, he finds somebody that knows something about it. He's run a few super shows, but he wasn't ready to take it to that next level. He found Jim Ross and started talking to him, and then boom, Oklahomania sprouted up, and that was kind of the first foray into the major pay-per-view scene and things like that. And now they're getting ready to go into Wichita and do TV tapings. It's Jerry surrounds himself with a bunch of good people who definitely know what they're doing. So that's what. And Jerry, I'll give him credit for this. He listens to what everybody has to say. When I was working there, I actually mentioned the Weatherford venue to him back in Broken Bow, because I was there for an event the night before, and I said, it's a big venue, but I would love to run there, because, and then here we are, 5 months later running the Pioneer Center, which, as you said, is a really great venue and a really large one at that. But here's the thing about that, and I really believe this now. This isn't just hot air. I really, really, and truly believe that there will come a time where we will be able to fill that Pioneer Center. I really believe that, man. I know it sounds a little far-fetched, because the industry, the business is good, but it also has its bad points. But I mean, is it too big of a building to run right now? Well, some will argue yes, others will say no. But the reality is, who knows? I don't know. There's just something real special about what we have. IWR. I really can't. And it's not, me being braggadocious, because a lot of companies, they spend a lot of time fighting with one another. But the reality is, okay, take for example IZW. It's no secret that there's always been some type of animosity between Johnny Z and myself, and I wouldn't say it's coming from my part, because I certainly don't have anything against him. Now, we get along now, but there was a time where we kind of didn't talk, and there were some things said. But the reality is, of course, he doesn't know this, but the reality is, do you know how many times how many countless hours I've spent talking to people, putting him over, and, extolling his virtues, talking about how good of a setup he's got. I really believe that he should be a whole lot farther than he is now. But the reality is, his business is just a tough business. And that's the good thing that Jerry's done. The same way with Tim Rockwell, but Jerry on a little bit of more of a bigger scale, is that the key, and more Jerry than anybody else. Because even I love Tim. He's one of my dearest friends. I have so much respect and love for him. But the reality is,
the one thing Gary doesn't do that I've seen every promoter do is Gary doesn't go online and blast anybody. He doesn't go on there and use profanity. He doesn't go on there and, now he has his faults. We all do. But me and him, we just don't do that type of thing, and I'm not saying that makes us better than anybody else, but the reality is we mind our own business and we just do our thing. Now, our comments made every once in a while that, we're bigger than, better, the best infants ice cream. Well, of course you have to have confidence in what you're putting out there, the product you're putting out there. But the reality is, overall, when you really get to know him as a person, he really is a good guy. And I really believe that when you do things right, you treat people right, it's going to come back and it's going to, help you. But, and it's, again, I'm not saying anything negative about anybody because I have a lot of personal friends in this business and I've worked with almost every company in the state of Oklahoma. I've been around and I can tell you that, that I really believe that the reason why Jerry is as successful as he is because of the relationships that he has developed with these gargantuan names. When he first started, he didn't know anybody. He would call me and ask me for this guy's number and this guy's number, and I knew a lot of people, To this day, he tells me the same thing. He said it to me again last night. He always says, man, Al, if it wasn't for you, man, I just love you. All this was because you trained this, and it's just so humbling to hear that. It just really brings a tear to my eye because he really knows where he came from. And he appreciates it, And I can remember when TCW first started, Matt Riviera in Arkansas, another guy that had a good head on his shoulder, good mind for the business. Should have been a whole lot further than we should have got a whole lot further than we did. But the reality is he was kind of in a different situation because all of his was all out of pocket, So he was really taking a beating. Whereas here, we got sponsors, we got different people putting in money, But with TCW, when he first started, I can't begin to tell you the countless amount of calls that he would give me. And I'm talking calls into the, I lost count how many times he called me throughout the years. He would say, hey, Al, can you get me such and such's number? Hey, Al, can you get me Hacksaw? Hey, Al, can you get me, whatever. And there I was. And as a result, same thing happened. He developed a friendship with me to the point where I was, part of the office, and not that I necessarily always want to be part of the office because I'm not part of the office now with IWR. I'm just, again, the resident guru, but, the token old guy. But, that's what sets Jerry apart from everybody else. And when he gets in with somebody, he gets in good with somebody, because of his personality, his approachability, So I see a lot of good things happening for IWR. Then again, who knows? We may fold tomorrow. I don't know. This business is just jacked up like that. But, he's really a good guy, and I hope and pray that the momentum that we have, that it keeps going, because I really believe the sky's the limit.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, you mentioned Jerry's approachability, and, it was a little over a year ago now that I reached out to him and said, hey, I'm a young kid. I don't know, how to get into the business. All I know is I want to be a part of it. And he was willing to give me that shot. And, for that, if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't be talking to you or learning knowledge from guys like you and Joe and everybody else on that roster, because everybody's got a slightly different story to tell. And, it's Jerry's, I'll swear this till the day I die, Jerry was probably the reason that I got back into wrestling and got into the wrestling business, even though I'm not doing anything in wrestling now. It's still a big part of me, and it's something that, if I were to completely leave wrestling tomorrow, I could at least remember and go, Jerry Bostic helped get me, to where I am.
Well, the thing about it is, a lot of people, and I've heard people say this, well, Jerry, he's not a good guy, blah, 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 blah. And it's been said about me as well, because a lot of people, they especially the indie talent, well, if you get in good with Al, you'll get in. Or it's not that Jerry's, again, they say that because Jerry may seem a little stuck up and he may seem a little, but the man is excruciatingly busy. He's got, you got to understand where he was 2 or 3 years ago to where he is now. It's completely like night and day. This man gets personal phone calls from Sting, who on his cell phone. Who does that? And same way with me. I've got my music going on. I've got so much going on. And so sometimes when people try to approach us and we seem unapproachable, it's because we're not really unapproachable. We're just so busy and caught up that we sometimes forget to get back with people, or truthfully, and I hate to say this, but if it's not urgent enough, we just don't get back to them in time. But we eventually do, especially if it's good for business. But again, he's very approachable, but there is a chain of command. There is a chain of command, and the reality is, you can't expect to go straight to Jerry or straight to Farat and get answers. Sometimes you have to start at the bottom. And even the guys like Coyote and Montego, who have a lot of pull in the company, same way. Sometimes they're hounded, by so much talent. Get us in. It's overwhelming. It really is. I get calls and texts and emails and instant messengers every day. But everybody wants to be a part of it, and I guess that's a good problem to have. But I think that our work ethic and speaks for itself, and it's just a matter of time, James, before you see the fruits of our labor. I really believe that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's weird because even myself, Prince Mahali, he reached out to me because I'd met him a couple times at Mid-South, and he said, I know it's a long shot, but you work at IWR, right? And just something like that, I was doing ring crew and security. He said, you think they'd want me, and now, of course, he's a big part of the IWR, and so it sounds like you and him have some plans, as you were talking about with me and Gene last night in Weatherford.
Well, I met him a little, a while back, and of course, he has a gimmick that's dear to my heart, so. But I'm going to tell you, the Prince Mahali story is interesting because when I first heard about the kid, I wasn't upset or anything, but I was a little taken aback that he was using the moniker of Prince. Now, coincidentally, I had already stopped using that. I wasn't using Prince Farat because I'm not a young guy, so I decided to use the Arab legend Farat. But, he started using Prince Mahali, and I don't know if it was as an homage to me or what. I really don't. But the reality is I didn't know the kid. I wasn't really too interested in meeting him, but then I met him and we started talking, and he grew on me, and I really, really like him. I like him a lot, and he's a good young man, very respectful. And he's got a future. He's working on his body, working on his look. His in-ring ability has gotten better. And at the time, it was supposed to be me and my nephew. And basically my nephew, Prince Mahali came into my nephew's spot, basically. And, I had mixed feelings about it, but the reality is it was some kind of something that happened between my nephew and Jerry, and I really don't want to go into because I don't know very much about it. But the reality is Prince came in just at the right time, and as a result, now we're tagging, and we'll see. It's just a matter of time. He's the more, modern interpretation of the gimmick, and I'm in the more old school interpretation of it, but we're trying to kind of meet in the middle so that we can mesh together well. So, we'll see. We've got some things up our sleeves, and I think it's going to be good, what we do together.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting to see, maybe some of the dueling princes, if you will, taking on the Von Erichs, the princes of the Von Erich throne,
Well, it's funny you should say that. That's one of the things that I was pushing for because, there was a history between the Von Erichs and Skander Akbar's Devastation Incorporated. And me being one of the very last people that he ever managed, he's the one that pretty much blessed me with that gimmick. So what better way than to do that? Now, of course, I wanted to kind of get involved more with Kevin because we're the older head, the old heads of the whole thing. But I think we can work magic together. I really think we can do something big, especially in Texas, because of that old school rivalry between the Von Erichs and Devastation Incorporated.
Oh yeah, imagine how great it'd be if the Sportatorium was still downtown. The shows you could run there.
That would be
the
awesome.
Devastation Reborn and the Von Erich boys. That could be a big show if the Sportatorium was still there. But man, I could sit here and talk to you for hours, but we're gonna try to wrap it up. Because as you said, you're a busy man, always doing stuff. But let's kind of put over a couple places you're at, man. Speaking of the Sportatorium, they got the Sportatorium signed out at the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, and you got some things on loan to Johnny Mantell down there in Wichita Falls.
Yeah, I went in there. I've developed a pretty good friendship with him. Of course, I've known him for years, but not on a personal level. And I brought in some cowboy boots that were given to me by Bull Ramos years ago. And then I had a war bonnet, a headdress that was given to me by Frank Hill or Jules Strongbow, and I donated that. And then, of course, a pair of my horn toe boots, and now I'm trying to get in. There's an interest there for me to come in there and help some of the kids. He has a school up in the 4th floor in the same building, so that's only 45 minutes away. So I'm going to try to do some of that as well. But I got just a lot of things coming up. I won't be at the show this coming weekend because I have to be in Nashville, Tennessee for a big 3-day concert that I'm performing at. But I will be at doing the television tapings in Kansas with Mahali. So there's a lot of big things coming up. So stay tuned, and I appreciate you calling me. My stomach's starting to growl, so I'm going to go eat something.
All right, sounds good, man. You got anything else coming up? You got the IWR show in November. Any other dates? Well, here, we'll plug it this way. I think you got a list of dates on your Facebook page. The Arab legend Al Farat. Al Farat on YouTube. Got a bunch of old match footage. All the promos, all the new promos are up there. Anything else you want to plug?
Well, there's a company down in Texas that runs in Bonham, Texas. They're called Texas Independent Pro Wrestling, I think it is. And it's the booker down there is a good buddy of mine. Matter of fact, one of my trainees, Shane Bennett, I trained him to be a referee. Well, they're doing some pretty good stuff down there. I'm supposed to be working a tag match, me and another Arab kid named Vaziri Hassan from down from San Antonio area. We're going to be tagging against the champion. I'm bad with names. I can't recall the champion's name down there. But anyway, the champion and what's his name? He used to work with. He was managed by Teddy Long.
Rodney Mack.
Rodney Mack. There you go. Yeah. Rodney Mack. So he's another buddy of mine. So we got a lot of big things. I think that's December 9th in Bonham, Texas. So it's all on my Facebook page, so you guys check it out, www.facebook.com/the Arab legend Al Farat. And check out my music site as well, www.facebook.com/Otter Trail, the Animal Otter Trail like in trail mix. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate you.
Hey, no problem. Anytime. It's always great getting to talk to you. As I said, I could sit here and talk to you for hours, but we're trying to let you go. And who knows, I probably won't be able to make the IWR show, but who knows? I might come down to the TIPW show and pull out the Syrian sympathizer gimmick, huh?
Well, if you do, let me know, man, because I'd love to see you there.
Sounds good, man. Great talking to you again. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, the Arab legend himself, Al Farat.